So yeah, this one, our next category, it went to Vendic for a work with a local Dutch sewing machine company that I'm not going to butcher the name of. I will leave that to Niek, Vendic's co-founder, to introduce properly. So yeah, over to you, Niek.
Thanks Rebecca and Hyvä for organizing again. Let me start off by I'm very happy that I'm included actually core web vital stats in this presentation before and not page speed insights after Ryan and Willem discussed this. So that's good. Saves me a little bit of time explaining. I will start with the name because that was something funny in the UK. For the Dutch, it's actually a pretty normal name. It's called Huissteden. And like Rebecca said, it's a local sewing machine shop with actually a pretty big online presence, but they started out as a local shop. Okay, so we had a challenge to make this local shop one of the fastest Magento stores out there while offering a feature-rich frontend and keeping it within a friendly budget, because those things can be hard to unite. I mean, an empty store is a fast store. Feature-rich store is harder to keep it fast, and especially within a SMB-friendly budget. So that was actually one of our main goals. We actually faced some issues before in the store. They weren't on Hyvä before. We of course migrated them. They had some core web vitals issues, some overall user experience issues, and most of them were related to complex product data. As in, we have a pretty nice product part finder custom built for this client, which holds enormous amounts of data, which of course could be complex to keep the speed in a very good range. Okay, so our job in this is basically not to mess things up. So Hyvä is already pretty fast out of the box. So if you run an empty Hyvä store, it's amazingly fast, of course. And most of the times we see these web shops get dragged down in performance-wise because things get introduced in a bad way, looking from architecture or looking from code quality, or even from perspective that it might not even need it. And yeah, it's really our job to avoid that. Of course, you do have to meet a minimum amount of business requirements. Like I said, the most fastest store might be an empty store, but that's not a sustainable situation, of course. So our job in this project is to, and in every project, by the way, is to create the ideal balance between the features, the speed, and the architecture. And on top of that, we actually added a lot of performance tweak on existing and native features. Okay, so the solution is pretty simple. Hyvä theme and Hyvä checkout. The second point, a solid work culture which promotes release early and often, is more of a culture thing. This enabled us to move really fast and test things out in the open, as is. We think that this might be a good improvement. Let's test it locally if it holds up, and then release it as fast as we can, as simple as we can, to production and test out the thesis. And of course, we have a very tight partnership with our hosting provider, Savvy, which also helped us along with this project. Second point, which was really important in this project, was regain control of the third parties, because third parties or third-party vendors, they might, and I emphasize might, they might mess up your best efforts, because there are many good third-party solutions out in the market. There are also many bad third-party solutions in the market, and you really have to make sure, if you introduce those solutions, you really have to make sure you introduce the right ones. Additionally, we made sure we regained as much as control as we can. For example, we like to use a server-side cookie bar just in the application itself instead of relying on a third-party servers. Same goes, for example, for loading third parties like a chat. And those might be convenient features for the user, but we try to limit the loading of that by introducing loading on demand features, which basically means that we don't load the chat for every site visitor. We just load the chat for visitors that are actively opening the chat. So we're replacing the chat widget with a static variant, and when one of the visitors actually presses the widget, we actually connect on that certain moment to the third party, and we can do that with multiple servers, and therefore we don't have to load them immediately on the first page load. Okay, on. For the rest, keeping it lightweight, so images might be a problem in some projects. Of course, now with Hyvä Commerce, there's a fantastic new feature to improve on this. This was before. We used a solution named ImageProxy, which is basically installed on the server, and it automatically resizes images to WebP in certain dimensions. That helps out, of course, page speed and the overall user experience a lot, and it makes the maintaining content-wise for the merchant a lot easier because they don't have to worry about it. Additionally, we used a lot of Magewire, for example, for add to carts and stuff, to make the site also feel fast in certain pages in user experience. So because we don't have to rely on page loads, for example, and overall just lots of small tweaks, because there's lots of information loaded in the store, and we made many tweaks in reducing the number of queries we do to the backend, or decreasing the size of the queries, and overall it made a really nice package. And we monitor it all using RUMvision, which is a real user metrics tool, like we just talked about. Mostly for front-end, and for the back-end we used either New Relic or Tideways. Yes. And the best way to show the speed is to actually show the speed. So we made a little recording about this. And the nice thing is it just looks, sometimes it just looks like it's almost like a static site, as in it's hard to see actually the page reloads, no layout shifts. Easy add to cart for accessories. This is the Magewire part I was just talking about. So if you get the threads for the sewing machines, you can add them really, really fast. And the overall experience is just really pleasant. Let's check out the cart pages and the checkout. Yeah, so this is the Hyvä checkout, and also loads amazingly fast. Yeah, that's it. So I don't have to explain this any further, I guess, because we just did it. So we can move on to the next slide, but it does matter a lot. The measurements with RUMvision are near perfect now. So if you look at the core wipe files here, LCP, CLS, IMP, virtual content for paint, they're all near perfect. We also checked, of course, Google Lighthouse, and like you said, we can use them in compliance with each other. The RUM metrics are more important to us, but we can use it as an additional metric. And we can see a big increase, especially in the Lighthouse scores. Here we see the actual page speed improvements per page. The biggest page speed improvement was actually on the product page. We split those up because you can see 2 product pages mentioned in the bottom of the graph. We actually did that because we have 2 types of product pages. One is a bit more feature heavy than the other. Overall, we achieved a improvement of almost 75%. So of course, we and the client were very happy with that improvement. And also, if you take into account that the target group of this store, they are using sometimes older devices, as in it's a sewing machine shop. It's not only young people shopping there, it's also older target group shopping there, and the older target group might be using older hardware, and that's why we're really proud of the real user metrics, as in even on the older devices, not the fancy new iPhones and not the fancy new MacBooks, we're also having a pretty fast performance scores. Thank you.
Thank you, Niek. That was, again, really great to see. And I love watching that video because I remember even the first time I watched it, I didn't actually notice the video changing that much. And then you're like, oh, no, we're on a new page. It's gone so quick. It's like instantly changed. And yeah, like you said,
it
there's no layout
almost
shift.
needs a delay.
Yes, slow down. It's too
Just-
fast.
We can add some loaders to
to
that.
make sure people see.
Loading the optimal experience for you.
Yeah, definitely.
It's a nice example of the niches where Magento really thrives. I've worked on a similar kind of customer, B2B, back when I had an agency, and there's a couple of these automotive and things like this where the customization, level of customizations that you can do on Magento and the performance that you can clearly get are really where Magento shines.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be an enterprise kind of project, and that's the thing I really like about this. It doesn't have to be super complicated. You don't have to make it rocket science. You just have to be smart about it, and then we can achieve this pretty good in Magento, and you can really outshine other platforms.
One of the things that I was going to ask is obviously what you mentioned, needing to limit the number of third parties and cookies and scripts and things. How do you generally approach that conversation with merchants? Because I think that can sometimes be the challenging part, is to educate them on why they shouldn't have maybe so many third party scripts, or that they should maybe control them a little bit more.
Yeah, you have to be very strict about it, because clients or merchant, they might underestimate the effects of it. Because if you tell them this is going to have a bad impact on performance, I mean, how bad could it be, right? Is it a little bit bad or really bad? Yeah, it could be really bad. And the good thing for us, and that makes it a bit easier, is that We have a fantastic team of project managers who are really well equipped to explain on this. But also, it's probably one of the main drivers why they contacted us in the first place as an agency, because it's one of our core values. So it's always good to remind the merchant in this case, this is why you're here. This is why you wanted Hyvä. So let's not get that out of sight, and let's remind each other why we're here. And it's not getting back to those slow stores. We don't want to get back in old bad behavior.
Definitely.
Yeah, and since with RUMvision, what you're using, it gives you constant feedback very quickly on performance changes. So if you would have an external marketing department with control over Google Tag Manager and they would add loads of extra tracking scripts, you would identify that as an issue very quickly, because you don't need to wait 28 days to find out that your performance tanked. You can actually see that much quicker.
Yeah, and then you don't quietly fix it. You let everyone know, so we can avoid it the next time.
Definitely. See if we've got any questions in the chat. If you have got any questions, obviously drop them in. I did forget to say that when we first switched to the Q&A, but yeah, any questions, please drop them in the chat. So we've had one from Tianlan, and that is, who is the target audience for this site? Grandmothers, Mark. And then Caroline has also commented that you did such a good job of being diplomatic, and then she asked the question.
Yeah, I have to be careful here.
Probably a wide range.
Yeah,
wider than usual.
Yeah, actually, Xenia told me, from Mali, she told me that more and more young people are getting into the sewing hobby. So I believe her on that. But traditionally, it's more. Let's just say it's more of the maybe for the grannies, maybe.
Yeah, I think
there was a technical question. Someone asked where you're doing the WebP optimization, whether Hypernode was offering that, or are you using an extension for that or a service?
Yeah, so we don't work with Hypernode. Like I said, we used another service for this, which is called ImageProxy. It was installed directly on our service. WebP is one of the easier accepted formats in our opinions, which is easier to get right. It offers a good balance between performance and how to say it? And a good compatibility. So that's a good trade-off in our opinion. And if you just use a service like WebP, like ImageProxy, it just makes life very, very easy. It's lightning fast, the conversion, and I can highly recommend something like this if you haven't already. And of course, like I said, it's also part now, of course, in another form in Hyvä Commerce. So yeah, definitely one of the easier targets to take care of from a performance hit if you haven't already. I mean, content is something that's easily messed up because it's managed by the merchant, of course, and they don't know what a big image is. If they upload an image of multiple MBs, they might not know. That's not the smartest idea. So you have to build in some safeguards, in our opinion. And it's also reasonable to expect that not everybody knows this. So in that case, if you can expect it, just prevent it, and it doesn't have to be a hard thing.
Absolutely. Thank you. Tianlan said, how would you optimize for that target market, accessibility, etc.? Is that something that's top of mind for this merchant as well?
Yeah, that's why we made the product part finder, and because this store also offers a lot of spare parts for their machines. Traditionally, those parts can be hard to find, as in it's a technical product, a sewing machine, and if you have to filter through lots of category pages and parts numbers, it can get difficult quite fast. So we made a feature, the product part finder, and they can add their current or the machine to their account, and then you get automatic suggestions for certain parts, which makes life just very easy. And overall, the UX, we just kept it very simple, as you just saw. It's a nice design in a simple way, as in we didn't overcomplicate it. Big buttons also helps.
Yeah, it does.
Following conventions.
Yeah. Lots of contrast, those kind of things.
Well, so yeah, I think we've got a few sewing fans in the chat, so that's nice. And Sam said that he's not a sewing fan, but he said it's a very fast site. So very, very good work. Nice work, Vendic. So yeah,
nice.
Thank you.